as knowing the mind, we breathe in, and knowing the mind, we breathe out. And there we mention the way to know the mind is to become aware of mental contents. To make it clear, we quote Satipatthana in the section in the Satipatthana, which deals with the mindfulness of the mind. And we mention when the mind is dominated by greed, we become aware of that. When the mind is free from that greed, we become aware of that. With greed, when the mind is full of anger or ill will, we become aware of that. When the mind is free from ill will and full of metta, we become aware of that. When the mind is contracted or depressed, we become aware of that. When the mind is scattered, we become aware of that, and like that. We mention when the mind is not developed, we become aware of that. When the mind is developed, we become aware of that. When the mind is tranquil, we become aware of that. When it is not tranquil, we become aware of that. Then we become aware of concentrated mind as concentrated mind, and not concentrated mind as non-concentrated mind. Then vimuttan va cittam vimuttan cittam vipajanati, when the mind is liberated, we become aware of that. When mind is not liberated, we become aware of that. Liberated from what? Liberated from hate, liberated from delusion, liberated from pride, liberated from wrong views, liberated from uncertainty, liberated from stiffness and torpor, sleepiness and drowsiness, and liberated from agitation, liberated from iri, shame, and liberated from dread, moral fear, or tapa. So it is a ragato vimuttan cittam, ragato vimuttan cittam vipajanati. And so forth. Dosato vimuttan cittam, dosato vimuttan cittam vipajanati. So when we say vimuttan cittam, the mind is free from all these mental impurities. This can happen temporarily, and until we attain full liberation, when all these are totally, completely eradicated from our mind. That is the mindfulness of the mind. The last tetrad is Anicca Anupasya Swami Vikrati. That is being mindful of impermanent. We breathe in and we breathe out. Mindful of viraga, non-clinging, we breathe in and breathe out. Mindful of cessation, we breathe in and breathe out. Mindful of relinquishment, we breathe and we breathe out. So, the other day we mentioned what impermanence is. Impermanence means uppada vayattena anicca. Uppada vayattena anicca. Anicca, impermanence means rising and falling. Only in this sense we call something impermanent, in the sense of rising and falling. In the sense of rising and falling, something is called impermanent. I repeat it in order to emphasize. Now, how many characteristics can we see in rising of 5 aggregates? What is rising and falling? Rising and falling of the 5 aggregates. When we say rising and falling, it doesn't happen in vacuum. There must be something to rise and fall. That something is our form, 5 aggregates. Form is rising and falling. Feelings are rising and falling. Our perception is rising and falling. Volitional formation or thought rising and falling. And consciousness is rising and falling. These are the things that we see rising and falling. And this rising and falling also has certain characteristics. So, for instance, we can see 25 characteristics in rising and 25 characteristics in falling. Altogether 50 characteristics in rising and falling. Let us go through this one by one. When we understand one, then we understand all. What are they? Contemplating the impermanence in materiality, I shall breathe in. Contemplating impermanence in materiality, I shall breathe out. And I mentioned this same goes with feeling, perception, formations, and consciousness. Now, impermanence of materiality arises when we see the characteristics or factors that involve in materiality, rising of materiality. What are the factors? Avijja samudaya rupa samudaya. Avijja samudaya rupa samudaya. When ignorance arises, form arises. What is ignorance? Ignorance is not knowing the Four Noble Truths. Our awareness of our understanding of Four Noble Truths is superficial, not deep, not complete and perfect. Until we have superficial understanding and not have deep, profound, complete understanding of suffering, we commit karmas, sankharas. Karma is another name for sankhara. Sankhara means sankhatam abhisankaroti iti sankhara. Buddha mentioned the definition of sankhara. Sankhatam abhisankaroti iti sankhara. Sankhata means that which has come into existence through forces and conditions. That is called sankhara, sankhata. We must understand these two words, sankhara and sankhata. Sankhata, now we all are sankhata, that we have come into existence through forces and conditions. And this sankhata is abhisankaroti. This life, this body is reconditioning. We are reconditioning. Always. So, in order to recondition the body, we have food, material food, kabalinkara. When we consume food, we replace the worn out cells in our body in order for us to survive. Now, when we are depleted of food, we become physically weak, emaciated, and very reduced to skeleton. We know that very well when we think of both Siddhartha Bodhisattvas, who was practicing self-mortification. He did not eat for many years and ate only 1 grain of rice, drank 1 drop of water, like that. So his body reduced to skeleton. We all know that. That happens to anybody who does not consume food. So ahara samudaya, rupa samudaya. When we consume food is very simple, very simple. That is one characteristic. Ahara we consume in order to maintain this existing body. Sankhata, sankhatam abhisankaroti. Abhisankara means repairing, reconditioning by consuming food. Why we want to recondition and repair and prepare and keep it alive? Because we don't understand that suffering, as long as this body exists, suffering exists. That is what the Buddha called this aggregate of suffering. Sankirtena panchupadana khanda dukkha. In short, the 5 aggregates evil, Dukkha-kanda. Panchakanda, we write Panchakanda here, equal Dukkha-kanda. So these are synonymous. Panchakanda and Dukkha-kanda, synonymous. Why this Dukkha-kanda exists? Because of ignorance. That is why it is said, this one characteristic. Avidya samudaya, rupa samudaya. And there is another factor for arising. That is tanha samudaya, rupa samudaya. Tanha samudaya, rupa samudaya. That is what in Dhamma Chakrapavatana Sutta, tanha is Pono Bhavika Nandiraga Sagata Tatra Tatra Abhinandini. This tanha is defined in terms of Pono Bhavika. Pono Bhavika means repeatedly becoming. Repeatedly becoming. Becoming has three kinds of becoming. Kama bhava, bhava means becoming. Kama bhava, rupa bhava, arupa bhava. All together 31 planes of existence. 31 planes of existence is called bhava. So this bhava, on the one hand we have ignorance, on the other hand we have craving. One of them is enough to make it bunch of suffering. When two combine together, how much suffering we have? You see? And therefore, tanha samudaya, rupa samudaya. Then, third is kamma samudaya, rupa samudaya. Kamma samudaya, rupa samudaya. As I mentioned, kamma is another name for sankhara. Whether they are sankhara, kamma is put into three categories. There are punyavi sankhara, apunyavi sankhara, anenyavi sankhara. Punyavi sankhara means accumulating wholesomeness, wholesome karma. Apunyavi sankhara means accumulating, collecting unwholesome karma. Anenyavi sankhara means accumulating imperturbable karma. There is one discourse in Majjhima Nikaya, Anenya Sappaya Sutta. Anenya Sappaya Sutta. Suitable for collecting imperturbability. Collecting imperturbability. So, that is called formless existence. For formless existence also there is a way to prepare. We prepare for formless. We prepare for sugati, wholesome states of existence like 6 divine realms and 1 human realms, 7 and hellish existence, altogether 11. We prepare for that. And then there is apunyapi sankhara. Anenyapi sankhara means we prepare ourselves to be reborn in formless existence. Anenya Sappaya Sutta describes how we condition ourselves to be reborn in formless existence. All these are the cause by craving and ignorance. Then, ahara samudaya, rupa samudaya. Ahara samudaya. Now, how many things are there for arising this form? Avidya samudaya, tanna samudaya, kama samudaya, ahara samudaya, and viparinama, the characteristics of viparinama. Characteristics of viparinama. Viparinama is characteristic of viparinama is viparinama is altering. Altering. Altering is the quickest moments of rising and falling. That is why I mentioned the other day when we talk about uppado panyati, vayo panyati, titasa anyatattam panyayati. Rising is visible, falling is visible, but in between rising and falling, what we call existence. Existence also is rising and falling. Just imagine something, I use my finger to show it, rising like this, my finger doesn't move that quickly. You see? Rising, 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 then falling, 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 and between rising, falling, rising, falling, rising, falling. So if we have this kind of image in our mind, we understand how quickly what is called present changes. Present is not something fixed. Present is not fixed. Present is moving, changing at inconceivable rapidity. Very quick. I mentioned also the other day, I repeat these things because these are very important things for us to remember. These quick changes we don't see, cannot comprehend fully, and therefore we don't know suffering correctly, because of three things. Because of three things we don't see the quick changes. What are the three things? Santati, Gana, and form. I mentioned this thing is as a shape. This is a shape. This shape appears to be the same yesterday, today, tomorrow, day after, and so forth. And this is deceptive. And we think, therefore, this is permanent. This shape, although it is like this, it is changing. We don't see that. Second reason we don't see them changing is compactness. It's so compact. If something is loose, we can see the changes quickly. When it is compact, like iron, steel, rock, things like this, they are so tightly compact. They are cells, no cycle, and they change. But their changes we cannot see. And the other is santati. Santati means movement. For instance, when we take a flashlight or firebrand and turn very quickly, we see a circle. But there is no circle, that is optic illusion. Because it's optic illusion, we think that there is a circle. Similarly, these things change so quickly, and that speed of change, santati means speed of change, is so fast we don't see them changing. And that is why these are called distortion, vipallasa, chitta vipallasa, what is other vipallasas? Sanya vipallasa, ditti vipallasa, silabhata vipallasa. Vipallasa means distortion. Perception, distorted perception, distorted views, distorted vision, views, and perception. Therefore, because of these deceptions, we don't see things correctly. And therefore, our understanding of suffering is not perfect. Our understanding suffering, we understand certain degree of suffering in our bodily, physical suffering. That's called dukkha. Mental suffering is called domanassa. Physical suffering is called dukkha. Dukkha, domanassa, upayasa. Domanassa, upayasa are mental suffering. Dukkha is physical suffering. We must comprehend all these forms of shapes of suffering, all these forms of shapes of changes in order to understand suffering. And these are the characteristics. Therefore, there are 5 characteristics of arising. What are the 5 characteristics I just mentioned? Arising through ignorance, through craving, through karma, through nutriments, and through characteristics of arising. These are the 5. And these 5 we apply to form, feeling, perception, thought, and consciousness. I mentioned 5 of the 5 aggregates, rising. And we multiply 5 by 5, we have 25. Similarly, for cessation also there are 5. There are 25. The same 5 we use for cessation. That means avidya nirodha, rupa nirodha. Tanna nirodha, rupa nirodha. Kamma nirodha, rupa nirodha. Ahara nirodha, rupa nirodha. Then viparinama lakkana nirodha, rupa nirodha. Similarly, let me say it in English, with the cessation of ignorance, there is the cessation of materiality. With the cessation of craving, there is the cessation of craving, materiality. With the cessation of kamma, there is cessation of materiality. With the cessation of nutriment, there is cessation of materiality. One who sees the characteristic of cessation sees the falling of materiality. And that applies to feeling, perception, volitional formations, and consciousness. Therefore, there are 25 there, 25 for rising, 25 for falling, altogether 50 characteristics. And then okay. Then the same thing appears, the same thing we can apply to various other categories. I just mentioned the category, then we can apply these things to them. Categories are, we mentioned only the 5 aggregates. Other categories are the 6 internal sense bases, adhyatikayatana, 6 external sense bases, 6-fold consciousness, 6-fold sense impression contact, 6-fold feelings, 6-fold perception, 6-fold volitions, 6-fold cravings, 6-fold applied thought, 6-fold sustained thought. These 10, I haven't mentioned only one of them, then we can understand the rest. In Mahasatipatthana Sutta, mentioned 60 places where craving arises. 60 places. What are these 60 places? If we take 60 places are of our 6 senses. 6 senses. What are the 6 senses? Eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and mind. Now, in each of them, or through each of them, craving arises. There are 10 places for craving to arise. 10 places. When I mention this, you may think, you know it. But if you don't think about it, if suddenly somebody asks you where the craving arises, how many places craving arises, and so forth, every single day. Chakku bhikkhave piyarupan sadrupan ettesa tanna uppajvana uppajjati. Eyes are pleasing, admirable. In the eye, therefore, craving arises and established. Ettesa tanna uppajvana uppajjati nivsamana nivasati. And the craving arises there and established. Where? In the eye. Why? Eye are pleasing, pleasurable, agreeable. Then visual objects are pleasurable, agreeable, craving arises. 2. Then eye consciousness is pleasurable, agreeable, craving arises. 3. Then eye contact is pleasurable, agreeable, craving arises there. Then feeling that arises depending on eye contact, craving arises and established there. 5. Then rupa sanya. Rupa sanya means perception of form. Rupa sanya, recognition. Sanya means cognition, cognitive factor, and repetition. Repeated cognition is called recognition. Cognition and recognition. Anyway, perhaps we can use recognition or perception. Number 6 is pleasant and agreeable. Number 7, thought of the rupa, rupa sanchetana. Thought of form is pleasing and agreeable. Number 7. Number 8 is rupa tanha. Rupa tanha. Craving for form triggers further craving. One craving arises, and that craving multiplies. That is rupa tanha loke pi rupan sadrupan ettesa tanha pada. Number 9. Rupa vitakko loke pi rupan sadrupan ettesa tanha pada. That means you think more and more. You think, craving arises. Then rupa, vichara. Vichara means sustaining. You maintain it. That is number 10. So, through the eye, there are 10 moments for craving to arise through the eye. 10 multiplied by 6, you get 60. 60 moment for craving to arise every single day. When we hear sound, nose, tongue, body, and mind. And therefore, and these, each of them, see the depth of this discourse, we don't know all these things. Each of them arise through craving, food, karma, and then what you call nutriment, and then characteristics of impermanence. Therefore, see the number of things that happen when we go into the detail of this discourse. Not only that, only these 60, there are other categories like 6 elements. What are the 6 elements? Earth, water, fire, air, space, and consciousness. Vijnana dhatu. Patavi dhatu, apo dhatu, tejo dhatu, vaya dhatu, akara dhatu, vijnana dhatu. There are 6 elements. We have 4 primary elements, and in Dhatu Vibhanga Sutta, Buddha mentioned 6 elements. And then 10 kasinas. Kasinas are mentioned casually in sutras, but not discussed, but they all are subject to our, what you call, ignorance. Then 32 parts of the body. If you take these 5 or 32 parts of the body, these 5 what you call factors of rising, and 5 factors of, because hair, head hair, body hair and so forth, take one of them and apply this to them, you can find thousands of moments of rising and thousands of moments of falling. Then twelve internal and external bases, sense bases. What are the 12 bases? Dhatu. 18 dhatus. What are the 18 dhatus? Chakku dhatu, rupa dhatu, chakku vijnana dhatu. 3. We have 6 senses, multiply 6 by 3, we get 18. That's called 18 elements. And then four material jhanas, 4 immaterial, they normally called jhanas, but as I mentioned, then they are called peaceful existence, Santa. Then the factors of dependent origination, there are 12. And all these we can use for their arising and passing. All these factors that I mentioned, we can apply to them. And then finally, 9 kinds of existence. 9 kinds of existence. they are called sometimes bhava. What are they? Sense desire becoming. Kama bhava. Bhava or jati. Again, bhava is becoming, sense pleasure becoming. Kama bhava. Then fine material becoming rupa bhava. Immaterial becoming arupa bhava. Recipient becoming sanyi bhava. Non-recipient becoming is asanyi bhava. Then neither perception or non-perception becoming is called what you call neva sanya, nasanyi bhava. Then one constituent becoming ek okara bhava. Four constituent becoming chatu okara bhava. And five constituent becoming pancha okara bhava. These are called 9 kinds of existence. So, the list I mentioned earlier can be applied to all of them. And then, Buddha mentioned in Anapanasati Sutta, now this is the end of that 4 tetrads. What are the 4 tetrads? First tetrad is, a tetrad means group of 4. Group of 4. First tetrad is mindfulness of the body. Second tetrad is mindfulness of feeling. Third tetrad is mindfulness of the mind. Fourth tetrad is mindfulness of Dhamma. Mindfulness of Dhamma is, I mentioned these categories now, are the most detailed and most profound, deepest state, deepest part of this Anapanasati Sutta. Now, Buddha mentioned that when we practice mindfulness of the body, in the way Buddha explained, that means when we practice the first tetrad, exactly as Buddha mentioned, that alone is enough for us to develop 7 factors of enlightenment. One of the 4 foundations of mindfulness, or one of the tetrads, if we follow exactly as Buddha mentioned, that is enough to develop mindfulness of the 7 factors of enlightenment. Number 1 is mindfulness factor of enlightenment. Buddha said, I say it in English because if I were to repeat Pali and English, it will take much time. On whatever occasion a bhikkhu abides contemplating the body as a body, ardent, fully aware and mindful, having put away covetousness and grief for the world, on that occasion, unremitting mindfulness is established in him. So, on whatever occasion, unremitting mindfulness is established in him, he develops the factor of enlightenment factor of mindfulness, or mindfulness enlightenment factor. Now, at the beginning itself, Buddha mentioned, if we practice mindfulness of breathing, we develop 4 foundations of mindfulness and 7 factors of enlightenment and Vidya Vimutti. Vidya Vimutti means knowledge and liberation. We develop knowledge and liberation. Now, we practice mindfulness of the breath. We practice mindfulness of breathing and end up in developing factor of enlightenment. Bojjhanga. Bojjhanga. That means in order to develop mindfulness factor of enlightenment, according to this discourse, we don't have to do anything. You don't have to do anything. People sometimes wonder whether we practice mindfulness and have another way of practicing something to develop mindfulness factor of enlightenment. Sati Sampojjhanga. No. Only if we practice mindfulness of breathing, that alone is enough to develop mindfulness factor of enlightenment, Bojjhanga, number 1. And then, when we practice mindfulness factor of factor of enlightenment, then the meditator investigates the Dhamma involved in mindfulness factor of enlightenment. The Dhamma involved in the mindfulness factor of enlightenment. What involves? Involves all this, he examined them scrupulously, very closely, meticulously examine each and every fact of the mindfulness of enlightenment factor. That investigation becomes a factor of enlightenment. Dhamma Vichay Sambandhi. Vichay means examination. The Buddha said, he investigated and examined that state with wisdom and embarked upon full inquiry into it. The one must make the mind very clear, pure, without clinging to anything in the world, getting overcome covetousness and so forth, and with impartial, pure, clean state of mind, without any biases, one examines the mindfulness itself. And then that examination, that inquiry leads to completing the mindfulness act of investigation. Dhamma Vichay Sambojjhanga. So he doesn't have to do anything else. He has to examine the same attainment, previous attainment, mindfulness. So he has to examine that. Then that attain. So about the investigation, on whatever occasion about thus mindful, a bhikkhu investigate and examine the state with wisdom and embark upon full inquiry into it. On that occasion, the investigation of state or investigation of Dhamma, enlightenment factor is aroused in him, and he develop it, and by development it, he comes to fulfillment of investigation of Dhamma. Then, next one. When he, these 7 factors of enlightenment has a sequential order, sequence. One leads to the other. In other places, we can see the sequence either Noble Eightfold Path. Others may not have that kind of interconnected, interlinked sequence leading one to the other. Gradual growth is not mentioned. Only in the fact of enlightenment, we can see gradual growth. One depends on the other. So, in one who investigates and examines the state with wisdom and embarked upon the full inquiry into it, tireless energy is aroused. On whatever occasion tireless energy is aroused, in a bhikkhu who investigates and examines that state with wisdom and embarks upon full inquiry into it, on that occasion, the energy enlightenment factor is aroused in him, and he develops it, and by development it comes to fulfillment in him. Now, when we, according to this statement, when we investigate, more and more gems count comes out of it, like digging in what you call gems, what you call into a pool, into a what you call mine, gems mine. You mining. The more you dig, more gems, precious gems come out. And then the meditator becomes more and more interested. More and more interested means he wants to dedicate more and more time. And he has energy, not physical energy, spiritual energy arises in him. More and more energy arises. That becomes a factor of enlightenment, energy factor. Now, then it leads to the next attainment, that is called rapture enlightenment factor. Preeti. I mentioned the other day, preeti arises by degrees. Kuddaka, Kanika, Okantika, Parana, Ubega, like that, preeti arises. First, very tiny little moment of preeti, and then it increases by degrees until the person, a meditator, feels as if he is physically lifted. Ubbega. Likewise, when we make effort, it is so powerful, spiritual effort, niramisa piti. Yesterday I mentioned piti and piti para. More joy. What is more joy? Joy that is fulfilling his spiritual search. And then that becomes an enlightenment factor. On whatever occasion, unworldly rapture. Unworldly rapture means niramisa joy. Niramisa joy arises in a bhikkhu who has aroused energy. On that occasion, the rapture enlightenment factor is aroused in him, and he develops it, and by development, it comes to fulfillment in him. Now we must remember the difference between samisa priti and niramisa priti. Samisa priti or Gehasita, there are two kinds, Samisa, Gehasita. Samisa is carnal joy, Gehasita is household joy. The same thing, but two different terms. So when this joy arises, or rapture arises, it has nothing to do with the worldly things, visual object, auditory, sound, smell, and so forth. This joy, this rapture has nothing to do with external things. The world is completely is gone from the mind. All this happens inside the mind. And therefore, that is called niramisa, unworldly rapture rises in him. Then, when unworldly rapture rises in him, he will have tranquility, passaddhi. Remember at the beginning, we first discourse, first tetrad, and in Satipatthana Sutta, we say, Passam bhayankaya sankaram asisami sikati, Passam bhayankaya sankaram pasisami. Passam bhayam means tranquilizing or tranquility. That is calming, soothing, relaxing state of mind. When that calm, soothing, relaxing state of mind arises, it arises from rapture, pleasure, joy. And also we must remember the difference between ordinary, mundane, or household, or carnal joy and spiritual joy. In the carnal joy or household joy, ordinary joy, which is full of greed, craving, when that joy arises, people clap their hands, jump up and down, sing song, and cry, and laugh, and do all kind of physical movements to express their pleasure, joy. You can see that. In spiritual joy is completely different from that. It makes you more and more calm, more and more relaxed, more and more peaceful, more and more tranquil. Tranquil. You take tranquilizer. When you take tranquilizer, you are so, I don't know any word to use it in, so calming, soothing, and peaceful. And then this rapture is calming rapture, soothing rapture, relaxing rapture, peaceful rapture. That arises. So Buddha says, in one who is rapturous, the body and the mind become tranquil. On whatever occasion the body and mind become tranquil, in a bhikkhu who is rapturous, on that occasion, tranquility factor of enlightenment is aroused in him, and he develops it, and by development it comes to fulfillment and perfect in him. That is called tranquility. There are two more enlightenment factors. I must go through that very quickly because my time is up. That is samadhi. Samadhi means concentration. And also because of that tranquility, you see the gradual, sequential arising of equanimity. Now we come to concentration. In one whose body is tranquil and who feels pleasure, the mind becomes concentrated. When everything is calm, mind becomes. On whatever occasion the mind becomes concentrated in a bhikkhu whose body is tranquil and who feels the pleasure, on that occasion the concentration enlightenment factor arises in him, and he develops it, and then it comes to perfection. When this concentration arises, that concentration makes the mind equanimous. So Buddha said he looks on with equanimity at the mind, thus concentrated. You see, when we investigate, he look on the factors with inquisitive mind. Now he looks on with concentration with equanimous mind. Now, inquisitive mind, equanimous mind are two mental states. Inquisitive mind, more and more things come into existence. Equanimous mind makes things more calm, relaxed, unbiased, unprejudiced, no emotional reaction. That is the last stage of the last factor of enlightenment, equanimous factor, upekka, sambodhyanga. There are two other things I mentioned it tomorrow and end this talk on this discourse. And I think we don't have any more time. Thank you very much for your patient listening.